Should you be an Uber driver and a Lyft driver in 2023? We have a lot to cover in this video, and I'm gonna go very in depth. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the 7 things you really have to consider when it comes to should you be a driver or shouldn't you be a driver. First thing I'm gonna talk about is the big 4. The big 4 benefits of being a driver. Now there's a lot of pros to being a driver and a lot of cons. And in this video, I'm gonna talk about both. But the first thing I do want to talk about is that for a lot of people who I talk to, they look at Uber and Lyft primarily as a second job. They do a 9-to-5 job, they want to drive on the weekends. They have a lot going on, so they just want another way to make some side cash, save up for a vacation, whatever the case is. And as a result, this might help you determine, do you want to drive or not want to drive? Now, the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to the big 4 is the flexibility. Point number 1, the flexibility a lot of people know about. However, I have had a lot of people say, hey Mark, my schedule is so random, I don't know if I can tell Uber and Lyft in advance when I'm gonna drive. And I'm like, no. You can turn on the app whenever you want. You can turn it off whenever you want. If you wanna do 1 ride in a month, great. If you wanna do 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 rides in a month, absolutely go for it, or even more than that. Uber and Lyft is truly the most instantaneously flexible job I have ever seen, perfect to pair with another side job. The second benefit of the big 4 is the barrier to entry. Now, taking a quick side note, in case you didn't know, I'm a former accountant. And when I studied accounting, I just spent years studying, getting a degree, spending countless hours behind books and everything. And what's interesting is when I go on Craigslist or Indeed or look at jobs, I do see a lot of accounting jobs saying, hey, you need a bachelor's degree in accounting or some type of experience. And with all that being said, the average hourly rate is about $20 to $25 an hour. But what's interesting, if you look at a lot of the average hourly rates for an Uber and a Lyft driver, it's about $20 to $25 an hour. And that's a very underrated thing about Uber and Lyft, is that if you think about it, for most people, you have a driver's license. In case you don't even have a car, you can rent one through Lyft and Uber. And I will talk about that a little bit later in this video, but the barrier to entry to become a driver is so little. And I mean, if you think about it, just needing a driver's license to then start making $20 to $25 an hour compared to, for me, when I was an accountant, studying for accounting, spending all this money and time in college and blah, 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 to make the same amount, it is a very low barrier to entry, making it a great way to quickly sign up without any degrees or certifications. Third part of the big 4 is the unlimited working hours. Now, I will say there is a limit depending on where you are of how long you can drive. Typically, on average, it's about 12 hours a day. That's the max, which is still a lot. And I know sometimes with some friends, they would be like, oh, I wanna get more hours at work. I need to make more money. I need to pay off this bill or whatever, but I just can't get any working hours. With Uber and Lyft, you really never have to worry about that. You always have rides out there. You always have opportunities to make money. And I think this is a great benefit. And again, another underrated one about Lyft and Uber is that you can really work an unlimited amount of time. And by unlimited, I might as well put that in quotation marks or put an asterisk on that. You're looking at about maximum 84 hours a week on average. Again, it depends on where you are. Some cities and states have different rules and requirements for that. But if you think about it, still, that's 84 hours you can work. So let's say if you really need to make a lot of money in 1 week for whatever reason, you don't have to worry about not getting hours. You could just turn on the app and start driving. And the last big benefit of being a driver, the last big 4 benefit I want to talk about is instant cash outs. This to me is so amazing that every driver knows about, but I feel like every non-driver doesn't know about, that you can quickly cash out in a second. And I'm not exaggerating. So let's say you're like, okay, I need to pay off a bill and the bill's $200. You can drive in a day, make $200, you hit a button on your account, and that $200 is now instantly in your bank account. You don't have to wait 2 weeks. You don't have to wait a week. You don't even have to wait a day or a few hours. It's there instantly. And like I said, with all this combined, I really can't think of any other job. And again, there's a lot of pros and cons to being a driver. I want to be very transparent about this, and I will talk about the negative aspects. But I gotta say, when it comes to the positive aspects, it's pretty awesome that you can drive whenever you want, how you want, and however much money you make, you then hit a button and now instantly have it in your bank account. The second thing I want to talk about is the requirements, because of course, even if you want to drive, if you don't qualify, well, that doesn't really matter. I will say every city and state has their own kind of specific requirements. Some of them are more strict than others, but to give you a general guideline, 1, you do need a valid driver's license. Not surprising there. The second thing is they will do a background check, not only when it comes to a criminal background check, but also a driver's background check. So even if you don't have anything on your criminal background record, if you have anything on your driver's record for whatever reason, and like say it flags the system, you potentially might not qualify for Uber and Lyft. And the third requirement, which to me is the most annoying, I'm gonna be honest, is the age. Now again, it does depend on where you are, but typically, on average, for Uber, you need to be 21 years or older. For Lyft, you need to be 25 years or older. I will say delivery driving is a bit different. I am gonna talk about delivery driving a bit later in this video, but to sum that up, you can start doing delivery driving at 18 or 19. So the good thing is the barrier to entry for delivery driving is a lot less than Uber and Lyft. I just want to say that. But I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of weird to me, just being honest, that like say if you're in college, you want to drive for Uber and Lyft to make side cash between classes and everything, but you're only 20, in most places, you cannot drive. Now, those are the main driver requirements, but of course, you have to have a car to drive, right? I mean, you're driving or you want to drive for Uber and Lyft. So let's talk about the car situation. Number 3 is owning versus renting. Now, I will say, let's say if you're like, okay, I qualify for Uber and Lyft, I want to try it out. I always suggest test the waters. You never know. You might drive, start loving it. You're making great money. You want to continue driving. You might start driving and be like, you know what? I hate this. I'm not making that much money. And I'll talk about the income a little bit later in this video. And you might be like, you know what? This is just not for me. Your car does have to qualify for Uber and Lyft. Again, it does depend on your area, but typically your car needs to be around 15 years old or newer. It has to have 4 doors. It has to have enough seat belts. It has to be in good cosmetic condition. And in addition, for both Uber and Lyft, you need to get your car inspected and get it approved in order to drive. Now, on the flip side of this, let's say you're watching and you're like, well, I want to drive, but I don't have a car. You can rent one. On average, I'd say renting, you're looking at about $200 to $300 a week. So this is very important to do the math out. Like, say you're like, okay, I want to drive on the side. Again, most people I find look at Uber and Lyft as a good kind of side job or maybe between jobs or something. So let's say you want to drive, and let's say you only make $200 a week driving, but you're renting a car. Well, if you're spending $250 to rent the car and you're only making $200, you're technically losing $50. In that case, being honest, you shouldn't drive. It's just pretty much a waste of your time. Maybe look at something else. There are a lot of pros and cons to renting. One of my friends owns her own vehicle and she also rents too, because she's like, hey, I drive full time and I drive so much. I'd rather that wear and tear and depreciation go on the Uber and Lyft rental vehicle than my own vehicle. That is another perspective to have as well. So even if you own your own vehicle, you can still rent if you want, but keep in mind, once you rent, you're starting off in the hole. You're looking at about $800 to $1,200 a month to rent a car in order to drive. So you may be wondering, with all this being said, okay, that makes sense, but how much money can I potentially make as a driver? Let's be honest, it's all about the money. But there is an asterisk on how much money you can potentially make, and that is your location. Longtime listeners of this channel can say it with me. The number one factor that determines how much money you can make as a driver is your location. This is a picture and survey from Rideshare with all these statistics. And as you can see, your location can determine whether you make a lot of money or not that much money at all. And it is kind of unfortunate because let's say you watch this entire video and you're like, you know what? I really want to drive. If you live in a remote part of Ohio or a remote part of Florida or a place that's just not that good to drive, I'd be like, hey, you know what? Don't drive. Maybe get another job, try to get another gig because you might not make that much money, especially if you're renting and you're starting in the hole. If you don't have a good hourly rate, Uber and Lyft might just not be a good idea. Now, a lot of people want to know, what is the average amount when it comes to all this, not just location, but just in general? I'd say 20 to 25 an hour, I think is a good average hourly rate for most drivers. Remember though, and I will talk about this in a little bit, you are an independent contractor. That does not factor in the fact that taxes are not taken out when you get paid. In addition, maintenance on your car, wear and tear, you're gonna have to get, more oil changes, more gas, all these different fees that really pop up a lot. So even though, yeah, it's 20 to 25 an hour in terms of the cash you get, the cash then you have to kind of give out or shell out for gas, maintenance, taxes, etc., that is something you do have to keep in mind. And especially if you've never been an independent contractor, this can be a very alarming thing for you, especially when you factor in how much money you're going to make per hour. So let's talk about that. Number 5, the employee or not status. Now there's 2 parts to this. First off, let's talk about being an independent contractor. I'm going to stress, I'm a former accountant, but I'm not your accountant. There are a lot of tricky things when it comes to accounting, and as Benjamin Franklin said, the only 2 things in life that are guaranteed are death and taxes. And if you're not prepared for tax season and making sure you're doing everything correctly when it comes to your taxes, you're gonna have a rude awakening. So I always suggest, as a side note, make sure you hire a tax accountant, make sure you save all your receipts. In very plain English, just save your receipts for anything in relation to driving for Uber and Lyft. If, let's say, you buy a phone mount for your car, an aux cord so people can play music when it comes to driving, if you want to buy napkins and whatnot. Being honest, as a side note too, you don't need snacks. I feel like that was kind of the pre-Uber and Lyft days. You don't have to worry about getting snacks, candy, but make sure you save your receipts for everything. Again, anything that's purchased in relation to being a driver, make sure you save those receipts and, of course, give them to your tax accountant. The third thing I'm going to say, talking now about being an independent contractor, it is tough to say based off the accounting. I want to say that. But typically, my best advice, save 30% of what you make. So for example, let's say on average you make $24 an hour, take $8, put that $8 in a savings account, you don't touch it until tax time. Now, do you have to give the IRS 30% of all your earnings? More likely than not, no. I will say it depends on your write-offs. There's a lot of factors to this, but 30% I think is a good, smart cushion just to be safe rather than sorry. The last thing you want to do is, like, say, drive full time, you go all into it, you drive a lot, you don't save enough, the IRS comes to you saying, hey, yeah, you wrote off a bunch on your taxes, but just letting you know, you owe us $3,000. And you're like, whoa, what? I owe you money? I thought I'd get back money. And they're like, no. You're driving. You're an independent contractor. Now, the second part about being an independent contractor is now the potential employee status. This is something that's ongoing, especially in 2023. This has been a big talk. And this actually does have a big effect on should you drive or shouldn't you drive. For example, here in California, Prop 22 happened, which kept Uber and Lyft drivers as independent contractors. However, there were a lot of clauses to Prop 22 that said, look, even though, yeah, you're staying as an independent contractor, we want to give you more rights, more benefits. So for example, here in California now, there is a minimum hourly guarantee, meaning that whenever you drive, if you don't make that much money, you will actually be bumped up by Uber and Lyft to make a minimum hourly guarantee, which is pretty awesome. So in my opinion, it's now more worth it to drive here in California than it was before Prop 22. Again, this does depend city and state, and this is constantly changing time and time again, and things move very fast because the whole debate of Uber and Lyft drivers being independent contractors or employees, I'm gonna be honest, is probably never gonna go away. That's always a big topic of conversation, a whole other subject for a whole other video, but I will say this, depending on the terms, like I said with Prop 22, for example, it might be more worth it to drive or less worth it to drive, especially when you factor in how much you drive, which gets me into the next point. Part-time versus full-time. I like to be very blunt in all my videos and get right to the point. I suggest start off part-time without question. The reason why is you want to test the waters. Like I mentioned before, your location has the biggest impact on how much money you can make. Maybe given how you drive, when you drive, your location, you might realize, like, you know what? I really like driving part-time and making great money. Awesome. Or you might start driving part-time and be like, oh, you know what? I don't think this is for me. I'm just not making that much money given all these different factors. I always suggest start off part-time and then potentially start driving full-time, because I've met a lot of drivers who drive full-time and they do love it. They make great money and all this kind of stuff. However, I've met a lot of drivers who said, you know what, I started driving full-time, didn't like it, didn't make that much money, it's not worth it for me. And that's what happened to me. I started driving part-time, was loving it, decided to move full-time, and I hated it. Being honest, I hated driving full-time. That's my own personal thing though. Everybody is a little bit different. I remember, for example, when I first started driving, this is like maybe like the 10th or the 20th ride I ever did. I was talking to somebody and they were like, yeah, my friend, he's a neuroscientist and he actually quit neuroscience to become a Uber and Lyft driver full time because he's making more money doing that and he's loving it a lot more. And I hate to say it, I remember thinking like, wait, he just quit neuroscience and just went into Uber and Lyft full time without testing it out or seeing if it's worth it or not, I don't think that's a good idea at all. Again, please start out part-time. Another big factor when it comes to being part-time versus full-time is peak hours versus non-peak hours. This is very unique that I find on average, again, it really depends, there's about 20-ish peak hours. In case you don't know, the peak hours are the times you can make the most amount of money. And I remember when I was driving part-time, I was driving about 20-ish hours a week, doing it part-time. And I remember thinking like, wow, I'm making really good money driving 20-ish hours a week. And when I went to full-time, I realized I didn't make as much more money as I thought. Like I thought, okay, I'm driving 20 hours a week. So if I do double, right, 40 hours a week, I should make double the money, right? No, because peak hours are the best times to drive and you make the most amount of money, it can be a bit deceiving going from part-time to full-time. Again, I want to stress, I'm not trying to deter anybody to driving full-time. I've met people who make bank driving full-time, but I do want to be transparent to start off small, test it out, and then go from there. Because like I said, the peak hours versus non-peak hours, there's a huge difference, which is very important for you, which gets me to point number 7, and that is the timing. So let's say you watch this entire video, you qualify, let's say you have a car or not, or you're gonna rent, you have everything kind of in place and you wanna drive, but let's say you're like, well, Mark, I have a very kind of tricky schedule. I can only drive Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Typically non-peak hours. I'd be like, you know what? I don't think it's worth it. Maybe you shouldn't drive and do something else. Now, of course, this does depend on your location. Like I said, do you have a minimum hourly guarantee or not? So there are a lot of factors to this, but one big thing really is the timing. If, let's say, for whatever reason, you can only drive in just not good hours to drive, it might not be worth it at all. For example, in a place like Vegas, and I've interviewed a lot of Vegas drivers, pretty much you can drive whenever. The peak hours are not as normal compared to another city, right? It really depends on your location, a lot of factors, but the timing is big because if you can't drive during a good time, it just might not be worth it whatsoever. However, 11 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m., horrible to drive for Uber and Lyft, but it's the complete opposite for this potential other job, and that is delivery driving. I feel like I had to bring this up because of how popular it's gotten. And in addition, I find for most people, when looking to drive for Uber and Lyft, the biggest thing, in addition to it being a great side job, is the flexibility. You can turn it on whenever you want, you can turn it off whenever you want. And this also includes delivery driving. And in case you didn't know, when it comes to the peak hours of delivery driving, usually around 10:30 a.m. to about 2:30 p.m. is actually a great time to deliver. A lot of people, let's say in an office or whatever setting, are ordering lunch, ordering Uber Eats, Postmates, DoorDash, and I've even had some delivery drivers, depending on their location, tell me they make more money driving during the day, during the lunch hours, than at night. And being honest, I would have thought that would have been the exact opposite. Of course, it does depend on your city and on your layout. And in addition, like I talked about earlier, the requirements are way lower. If, let's say, you're 19 years old, all you need, I believe, is like a scooter. You can drive for Uber Eats or deliver for Uber Eats with a scooter. You can even do it on foot. So let's say you're like, shoot, I don't have the credit to rent a car, or I don't know if I'm gonna qualify. You can start doing Uber Eats on foot or on a bicycle, let's say in a city, and you need to be about 18 or 19 years old. So that's a great way to start. You could start with a bike, maybe treat it as a nice workout to get paid to work out in a sense. Start there and then work your way up. Like say if you do want to drive or do delivery driving, however you want to do it. There are a lot of pros and cons to delivery driving. I'm gonna be honest, for me, again, I like to be very transparent in my videos. I hated it when I did it. I prefer Uber and Lyft way more to Uber Eats and DoorDash and Postmates, etc., etc. And by the way, might as well say this as a side note, Uber Eats, Postmates, same thing because Uber Eats bought them. So when you do drive or deliver for Uber Eats, you also will do Postmates deliveries. Just want to say that as a quick side note, but overall, delivery driving can be a great option. And in addition, for Uber, not for Lyft, but for Uber, if you qualify to drive for Uber, they also qualify you for Uber Eats, and you can even go back and forth. Maybe you like driving for Uber Eats more during the day, Uber more at night. You can easily go back and forth however you want to do it. And now, a second bonus point I want to talk about are 3 excellent ways to make the most amount of money driving. First off, sign up with both apps. When you sign up with both apps, you get the best of both worlds. And I know, some people say, hey Mark, Uber's big in my city, Lyft isn't. Or the opposite. I know some people who say that Lyft is bigger than Uber. Either way, sign up with both apps. It's free. And in addition, you can get that huge sign-on bonus. You have to click someone's link or use someone's code to get that sign-on bonus. Because I remember when I signed up, I just went to uber.com and did it. And I remember at the time, they were giving $1,000 sign-on bonus, and I got nothing. If I clicked one of my friends' links or just Googled Uber and Lyft link online or something, I would have gotten $1,000 in my pocket. So make sure you get that sign-on bonus. But the good thing about having both apps is a lot of times with both apps, one will have a special bonus for one weekend or a special incentive on another weekend. And in addition, you may notice, wait, in my area, Uber doesn't pay that much, but Lyft pays a lot, or vice versa. It could go back and forth of which app actually pays more. Sometimes during the week, for example, Uber might pay more, but then on the weekend, Lyft will pay more. Signing up with both apps gives you the best of both worlds. The second pro tip, drive during the peak hours. I know I already mentioned this, but I definitely have to say it straight out. The best times to drive are 7 to 9 a.m., 5 to 7 p.m., Friday and Saturday nights. So if you think about it, morning and evening commutes, when it comes to Friday and Saturday nights, I'd say starting around 7 or 8 p.m., I call them the pre-game hours where people are going out, but they're not like super drunk yet. So you're looking at about 7 to 8 p.m. till about 3-ish a.m. on both Friday and Saturday nights are great times to make a lot of money. The last pro tip I want to give is bonuses. Make sure you check the bonus incentives and all the terms, because I talk to a lot of drivers who make insane money, and I'm telling you, the number one thing I hear from all these drivers who make a good amount, like I know some drivers who make 40 to 50 an hour, I'm not exaggerating, the number one word I hear, bonus. They study the bonus structures, they make sure to look at it like a hawk, they develop their own techniques and tricks to maximize how much money they can make from the bonuses. Make sure you don't ignore the bonuses. And then especially when you combine this with having both apps, this is perfect. Like say on a random weekend, Lyft has tons of bonuses, you hit all those metrics, boom. Like say once those bonuses run out on that weekend, maybe switch to Uber if they have their own bonuses. And these are just 3 example pro tips from a video I made talking about 25 tips for new Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. I have it listed below in the description to help you make the most amount of money when driving.